Hello everyone, Toad Pilot here. I'm going to talk a little bit about the ANG landing gear system and just give you some basics about it, what I know about it. So basics are, it's a trailing link landing gear. It's electric hydraulic controlled, meaning that it uses an electric pump to pump hydraulic fluid to raise and lower the gear. It does have built-in up and down indications in the hydraulic cylinder, which I'll show you here. Because of trailing link, there are shock absorbers on the back side. There are no gear doors on these landing gear, which I'm okay with that. It simplifies the gear process. The nose wheel does stick out from the bottom of the aircraft when the landing gear is raised. But again, not much of an issue that I really see with that. Right now, landing gear has kind of been the one thing that's given me, I'll say, the most issues right now, which I'll talk to that here in a little bit. But there's 3 independent hydraulic cylinders that raise and lower the gear for each one. All of the hydraulics are already plumbed, or at least that's the way it came with my kit. It comes up to this hydraulic pump here, and from what I can tell, this hydraulic pump is a trim motor off a boat. So it's marine grade hydraulic pump, puts out about 2,500 psi from what I've researched on it. 3 different lines, basically controlling the hydraulics. All right, so inside, all the hydraulics are plumbed through the aircraft, as I mentioned before already. I went through and separated all the joints and resealed them with Loctite. I think it's 545 or so. It's specific to hydraulic cylinders, just to try to seal them up. When I came, there were leaks with the system. So besides the electro-hydraulic aspect of the landing gear, it also has a backup CO2 powered blowdown. So basically you take what looks like a normal CO2 cartridge, put it in here, and then there's a little pin that as you screw this in, it should charge that CO2 cartridge, and then allow, basically there's a valve underneath it that then you would open the valve and move the valve, and that would open up for the CO2 to discharge into the hydraulics to then hopefully pressurize or blow your gear down in the case of emergency. Now the only way that works is if basically you don't have a major hydraulic leak and you got to have hydraulic fluid in the lines in order for that system to work. All right, so that's the basics of the system. Now we'll talk about some of my issues that I've had with this. So when the aircraft arrived, immediately I noticed that my left hydraulic cylinder was basically flat all the way down, compressed all the way down. The right was fine, so pulled that off, and I've been pretty much working on this since May, and it is now September right now. So it has been a problem for me. I'm trying to extend this back out. All right, so in the end, I went through, tried to get seals from ANG, which they weren't real responsive. So I was able, luckily the build manual gives a good enough description that I was able to source the seals to rebuild the cylinder, which the cylinders come pre-built from ANG. Another thing before, a problem was this Schrader valve assembly was tapped at an angle, so it wasn't flush. So I went in and cleaned that up as best I could, got it as straight as I could, and then resealed that back up. So anyway, I go through, rebuild this, get all the seals, wiper seal, internal seals, O-rings, and then rebuild it, and thinking I'm okay. But then I just discovered that this cap here comes already assembled to this tube, and they use basically a thread lock, but it's like a permanent thread lock that now when I would charge this and lay this on the side, I would get oil leaking out the bottom of where this joint is between the cap and the cylinder. Unfortunately, there is no way to get that cap off that I've been able to find. I've added heat. I've tried to use, because I got to use soft jaws on this cylinder to not damage it. Try to get that cap off, and I'm basically at a point where there's nothing I can do at this point, where I just messaged Jamie at Veloci to ask ANG for any suggestions, or basically to just tell them like, hey, I need a new cylinder and cap, because I have no way that I know of getting this cap off to reseal that without damaging the cylinder here. So, okay. So on to that. So that's the shock absorber. Other than that, it's pretty simple, basic shock absorber. It does use silicone oil, which that's something you'll have to buy. It's not cheap. I was able to source it here locally in the United States. Okay, so now on to the hydraulic cylinders. So this is for my right main. Just a basic operation of how the up-down indication works, which I think is kind of interesting how this works. So as you can see, there are these pins. They're Allen keyed on either side, that basically you will turn these down to a certain distance, and you take a multimeter to test it. And then the multimeter, by ohming it, will tell you whether or not when the cylinder's up, it's making contact with this part here, then, or down, it'll be making contact with this brass ring here. And once it makes contact with it, that connects your circuit. It's a redundant system that you got one on either side, so that even if one, kind of isn't showing continuity and the other one does, you should still get a gear downlight. On the other end, you basically have the same thing, which will give you a gear up light. The third pin there in the middle is basically like a ground pin for your indication. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So that, it's just, instead of using switches for your up downs, this uses pins and then these brass rings as this cylinder travels up and down. Okay, so now some issues that I found, or maybe some issues potentially in the near future, is unfortunately around these pins, it's pressurized to, the 2500 psi. There's kind of like a nylon sleeve in here to keep it so that it doesn't ground out with the casing, for the gear indication. But what I've noticed is that there is hydraulic fluid that can leak out of there. So I've used that Loctite 545 hydraulic sealant compound to go in and, seal around these pins. And so far on the other two cylinders, I've pressure tested those work and haven't had any issues. I know Jamie at Veloci, they had issues with these nylon inserts, but luckily I haven't quite had any issues so far. What I did have issue with was getting continuity on one of these pins when I was trying to test it. So I ended up finally like tearing this apart, and in the process was thinking that it was like these rings, these brass rings, which here's an example of one that's out, and they're split rings. So I thought maybe it compressed too much and that it wasn't making contact. So in the process of trying to adjust it and compress it, whatever, of course, I end up breaking it. So brass is pretty freaking brittle. Doesn't take much, and I broke it. So luckily, ANG sent me two different ones that I was able to put two new ones on. Now back to my original issue where I wasn't getting one with continuity. What I believe happened now is that these brass rings our split. Well, here, I'll just show this one. Our split. So what I think happened was this split had rotated around to this side, and then so it was coming up, it wasn't making contact with one of the pins. The other pin showed good continuity, but this one didn't. Now, per the build manual, it says that you're supposed to rotate the pins around to the other side. So this cylinder already came assembled, so I can't say one way or another how ANG assembled it, but what I believe happened was that either through me twisting the cylinder, not knowing it, or you know, some other aspects of that maybe I'd move this brass pin around and it wasn't making contact with one of the posts. So I've got that together now, or I've at least got the new pins, the new brass rings in and ready to assemble it and pressurize it. So, yep, that's a basic rundown on these cylinders and also on the landing gear system. I'm hoping that once I get it pressurized, then I can once I get it put together, that then I can put hydraulic fluid in, pressurize it, and test the operation. Just basic, like running it up by putting power on the motor and then running it down. I also definitely will have to bleed the system, which there's a lot of hydraulic line to bleed. So, all right, I hope this was helpful in explaining a little bit more about the landing gear system. As I mentioned before in my other posts, I'll try to, you know, as I come across some different systems that I'm working on, slowly but surely, you know, I'll try to put them in the comments, or sorry, make a video and then, you know, keep it up to date on that. If you got any comments or anything, please feel free. Again, I'll have a link to my build blog at the EAA build site in the comments, so feel free to look at that and keep up on that. Okay, thanks for watching.